FK Day, welcome to the Conscious Podcast. We have so much to talk about, most of it revolving around two wheels. Because
Well said.
bikes really have been your life, haven't they?
Well, only for the last 35 to 40 years.
And how old are you?
I would say 63-ish, but I look more like 75, but I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, I think you did a good job. I thought you were going to say I look more like 50. Um, so tell me, and obviously bikes are our connection here today, exploring. What really fascinates me about your story is how much more a bike can mean than just an environmentally way to transport a friendly way to transport ourselves from A to B. And that I think is what you've really shown us with your work. But for those who don't know you at all, let's go right back to the beginning. How did it start with bikes?
Well, so my brother and I and some friends started a company back in 1987. Oh my God, that's so long ago.
Did you
Um,
have a perm?
to,
I did. Had a perm.
did you have a
A
perm?
perm. Do you know what a perm is? So
I
your hair
don't
all
know.
goes curly. You've got just
Oh,
straight hair, yeah. But in the 80s, really, you should have had a perm, all curly hair
oh,
out here, and leg warmers.
okay.
That was
Okay,
my
well, I'll
bit
work
of
on that, and
okay,
then maybe
yeah,
the next time we get together, then I'll show you my perm.
exactly. So
But
go on. You started in the 80s. The
we
rest of us were
started,
getting perms. You were starting a company.
yeah. I had other problems back then, I'm sure. But my brother, we weren't in the bike industry, and we weren't bike fanatics. Neither my brother nor I were racers. We weren't, we didn't cycle every day. But my brother liked doing triathlons. He was a weekend triathlete, and I was a weekend mountain biker. And back at the time when being a triathlete and being a mountain biker, not many people did. And we were living together in downtown Chicago, and he came back from a training ride one day. He said, "Geez, okay, I'm going to get killed out here if I keep riding my bike to get miles in." And at that time, you had to reach down to the down tube. That's the slanted tube on the bike to shift your gears. So you had to take your hands off the handlebar to shift your gears. And my brother and I had always wanted to go into business together. Like when we were little kids, we would sit under the blankets and go, "Oh, Stan, we're going to go into business together, right?" And he'd go, "Yeah, FK, we're going to go into business together." And so he came home from his training ride and said, "We've got to put shifting on the handlebar so you don't have to take your hands off the handlebar." And that began the first product of our bike, which was called Grip Shift. And it was at the end of the handlebars where you just do a little twist and it would shift the gears. And that way you could always maintain control of the bike. But we never imagined anything much further beyond that. We always wanted to build uh, a company that had significant impact and could be sustained and sustainable. And but we never imagined it would ever go to where it is today, which is such a wonderful, wonderful surprise. But we started manufacturing that product, and nobody liked it. It was kind of like the product only a mother could love. Um, but we loved it, and but then we saw that no one was buying it, so that was an issue.
Yeah,
And then we evolved
that's an issue for a new business.
So we evolved it into the road bike market was declining, the triathlete market was growing, and mountain bikes were just coming on the scene. And we evolved it to become a triathlete and mountain bike product. So that was really our big start for that company, for SRAM.
And that company turned into, as you've kind of referred to, a huge company. I mean, mega company, right? What are
Yeah,
you? How do we gauge that?
It's the largest component company in America and second largest in the world. So when we started, we were just building shifters, gear shifters for bicycles. Now we basically make every single component that's attached to a frame, but we don't make bikes, just the components.
Okay. So, job done. The end. Surely. That's the end of the story, isn't it? Man loves bikes, wanted to go into business with his brother. They went into business, bit of a sticky start. That kind of works with gears as well, doesn't it? Sticky. And then
That's a good.
done great, the end. Only it wasn't the end. And this is what's so fascinating about the story, right? What happened next?
So back in December of 2004, uh, most of us, you and me, and those most people on this podcast will remember the Indian Ocean tsunami. And I think that was one of the first major disasters that was ever recorded digitally by individuals who were experiencing the horrible tragedy of the tsunami. So we're my brother and I and our families were all together for Christmas that year, and we're watching this tragedy unfold on the television, and we thought, oh my God, this is horrible, and we processed that deep in our hearts. And then we went back to work in, January 1. And, my experience was that I couldn't shake it, and that everyone in our office at our company couldn't shake it either. It's like, we've got to do something about this. So I thought we could either raise money and send it to the Red Cross or something like that, or maybe we could do something differently. We could use our expertise in the bicycle industry and provide basic transportation to these people who had lost so much, friends, family, entire infrastructures destroyed. Clearly they needed basic transportation. Maybe we could provide basic transportation. So I called around to all of the relief organizations, in the US and Europe. And I said, hey guys, we're in the bike industry. We know how to deliver large scale bicycle programs. What do you think if we delivered a large scale bicycle program into your relief effort? And 100% of them said, no, 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 just send us your money. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So my spouse at the time and I flew over to Indonesia and India and Sri Lanka, and we interviewed relief organizations on the ground, and the response was 100% different. They said, you can do a large scale bicycle program? That would be incredible. And we partnered with a relief organization on the ground in Sri Lanka and delivered 24,000 bikes. And the impact was, deep, it was immediate, it was measurable, and it had never been done before to scale. And that's what began this next phase, at least of my life and SRAM's life, is bikes at the top of the market. It's good to do Tour de France stuff and Olympic stuff and World Cup stuff, but the impact of simple transportation at the bottom of the economic pyramid is off the charts. So we
Have you got
built
some
more.
good examples of that? What are your memories of that time, of the changes for people on the ground?
So there were in Sri Lanka. So this is disaster relief. So normally we measure. We always measure everything we do, just so we can see the impact and see how to improve the programs. But in Sri Lanka, so many people were displaced or living in the wreckage of their homes or communities without access to transportation, that just seeing the simple transportation impact people. I would walk down the street and I would see a father and a mother and a daughter on a bike riding down the street, and the father would be going to his job, maybe to buy fish and come back to the village and trade it, and the mother would be going to a healthcare clinic to volunteer support or whatever, and the daughter would be going to school. And, in all of my life, bikes were pure joy, but in their life, bikes were essential. And if they didn't have a bike, those three people would be walking for miles and miles and miles. And that was this big revelation that, I'd been in the bike industry for, at that time, 25-ish years. I don't do math. They don't let me in the accounting department. Anyway, for a long, long time. And I had never fully understood the impact of a bicycle until I saw that situation, that these people might not have gone to school, might not have gotten health care or given health care, and might not have gotten a job. And their destitution would have just been, like going down the toilet. So our belief at the time when we first started that program, it was to deliver, I think it was 24,000 bikes into Sri Lanka. We thought, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to measure it. We'll publish it, and everyone will get the idea. We did it, measured it, published it, and a relief organization came to me one day and said, FK, the work you've done here is clearly impactful, and it's never been done before to scale. You've got to scale this up and make it sustainable in Africa, because the same number of people that died in the tsunami die every 2 weeks in Africa from hunger and preventable disease. You've got to do this in Africa. And I was thinking, that wasn't my plan. I was going to go back and keep designing and building products for, the top of the market and racing and all of that. But you actually can't turn your back on a comment like that. So we decided to scale it up in Africa. And now I think we've delivered 700,000 bikes, over 700,000 bikes through 25 countries in Africa and South America. And the impact is, again, off the charts just because of simple, basic transportation.
And you guys went and lived there as a family, didn't you? It wasn't just, oh yeah, well, we'll send some bikes to Africa, then off we go. Bye, waving a container goodbye. You guys were properly immersed into what you were doing, in the sense that you lived in Africa for a time, yeah?
Yeah, we spent so much time traveling over there, and we would, if you want to go from, at that time I was living in Chicago, if you wanted to go to Africa from Chicago, it would be easily, 20 to 30, sometimes 35 hours of travel. So we would go for months at a time. And then at one point we said, well, we should just base ourselves there. And if we need to go back to Chicago or the US or Europe, we would just travel back there. So we moved to Western Kenya, to a small industrial town called Kisumu. And we're based out of there. And again, just living within the communities where you could see the impact of basic transportation is so moving. We have a saying in our organization, and it's kind of like, it's not a mantra, but it's kind of our North Star, that all answers are found in the field. So if you go to the field, if you go to the people that you serve and really try to understand as best as you can as a Westerner, understand their needs, then you can design from scratch what best fulfills their needs. And it's the exact same process you use for the top end of the market. You work with racers, you understand their needs, you listen to their feedback, and then you design accordingly. And we did the exact same thing for those people that we served. And in a way, it was like finally giving voice to some of the poorest people on the planet. And that was really important.
And that resulted in the end, you designing a whole new bike.
Yeah,
Tell
I
me
mean, I
about
was
that.
surprised that wasn't in my imagination until I really went in the field and understood that in my mythology, I always thought that the bikes that I had seen in Africa were, robust. They would last forever. People would love them. They would bring them into their rooms and their houses, and all of that, which was true. They loved them, they depended on them. But when I encountered them, they broke every day. The cost of maintaining them almost didn't match the benefits that they were receiving in terms of basic transportation. They were being failed by the organizations that manufactured and delivered them. And the manufacturers were mostly from India and China, and they had become detached from the marketplace. They only manufactured, and if you don't know the marketplace or the people that you're serving, the only way to compete is by reducing costs and price. And when you do that to the point where the bike no longer serves the end user's needs, then you're failing the end user. And what we were able to do at a low cost is reattach the end user's voice to the manufacturing structure and by design. And that made all the difference.
And so, what were the key differences in that new design?
I would say one, we designed for durability, reliability, repairability, and low cost, whereas the existing manufacturers only designed their bike for low cost because that's the only way they knew how to compete. And we
Yeah, and they're
tried, we
looking at a
tried it.
market. I guess they're looking at a market that's, or it could be me buying that bike, or it could be, as you say, somebody in rural Africa buying that bike. Whereas you're designing much more specifically, because to the naked eye, the person who's not the bike designer in this conversation, when I look at that bike that you designed, I see, God, that's a really clever thing on the back that can carry planks of wood or babies or also, those are the parts of the design that obviously stand out to me because I can't see the intricacies of what makes that more robust and more reliable. If it's fat tires, I'm guessing it's more robust. That's the expertise you're talking to here. That's the level. But it was so much more, wasn't it? This bike is a really useful tool.
Yeah. And it doesn't take that much more cost to make it right for the people that you're serving, for your end user, your marketplace, however you want to call it. And when we were able to spend time and really learn what was going to be useful and then design according to that end user's needs, it was revolutionary. And we didn't want to go into the bike business. We really tried to use the existing infrastructure, the existing supply chains, the existing suppliers, but they were so detached. I would buy dozens of their bikes, put them in communities, and then watch for weeks and weeks how the bikes were used, how they failed, and they would come back, and I would just bring, boxes and boxes, crates of parts back to the producer, and I'd just dump them on their office and go, "What the heck just happened here?" And they
I bet
go,
they
"Well,
loved you.
oh, not so much." But they had become detached from the marketplace. They had no idea how bad their bikes were. They simply knew that they had to be lower cost than the guy down the street because that's the only way they could compete. So they took the usability out of the bike.
And tell me about, I read some of the stories, for example, about girls, the impact on girls and school and their education that a bike can have, because they're so much safer cycling to school than and we're talking miles, many miles. They're so much
Yeah.
safer cycling to school than they are just walking to school. They're way less vulnerable, for example. What are other examples of? I mean, I'm thinking journey times, which to us here, where we pop in our car, electric vehicle, hybrid vehicle, or whatever, we're still popping in our car. What are some of the examples of mileage, for example, and common journeys?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, and I'm pretty darn sure that every one of us on this podcast doesn't have a transportation issue. We have choices. You can walk, you can take a bike, you can take an electric bike, you can take the train, your car, a bus, the airplane. We all have so many choices that we don't even think about it. It's just a choice. How do you feel about traveling today? But the areas that we work, which are generally some of the poorest in the world, their only mode of transportation is walking. So if you are a girl, particularly a girl in these countries, you have to wake up extra early. You have to walk, possibly an hour to go get water and then walk an hour back, then prepare a meal, get your other siblings ready for school, and then possibly walk an hour or two to school. And I kind of wish my son had that drive to go to school, but he's 17, he's sorting it out. But that's about that. But that is the reality of school kids where we're working, and particularly the impact on school girls. So we focus, I think we've done maybe 300,000 bikes, maybe 400,000 bikes to schoolgirls in rural communities in multiple countries in Africa. And we just don't provide the bikes. We have to measure the impact so we can change the mindset of the UN, the World Bank, USAID, DFID, all these relief organizations, because nobody in those in those organizations that have authority to allocate funds, none of them have a transportation issue. And none of the people they have in the field have a transportation issue. They all have their Land Rovers and Land Cruisers, and they roll up the windows and turn on the air conditioning. They don't have to walk 2 hours to get to school every morning and 2 hours back. So we've spent a lot of time providing bikes to these schoolgirls, and the impact is immediate. You Attendance goes up, enrollment goes up, health goes up, because if a girl can get to school when she gets home, sometimes they use the bike to go to the clinic. Sometimes they use the bike on the weekends to go to the market, and it goes on and on. Simple, basic transportation at the bottom of the market is off the
And
charts.
it's transportation that also doesn't rely, I mean, A, it's environmentally friendly, which I know is the last priority right there, because priorities have to be food, water, all of those other basics. But it's environmentally friendly, and it doesn't rely on an infrastructure, and it has no cost to keep going. That's the beauty of bicycles. There's no infrastructure needed. You don't, well, apart from repair, there's no petrol station needed. There's no gas station that you have to have halfway between your house and school or anything like that. But then in terms, because I love this story because I keep going, and there's more. Because then in terms of infrastructure, the infrastructure that is required is fixing these bikes, maintaining these bikes, supplying these bikes. And part of a kind of a conscious and sustainable mindset is how we treat people and how we enable people to help themselves. Um, and that's been very much part of the remit as well, hasn't it, with this project?
Yeah, yeah. A bicycle is a machine, and no matter how well we design it, um, one would expect there always to be maintenance and repair and upgrades, quite frankly. But maintenance and repair are a big deal, and we've designed the bicycle to be as reliable and robust and durable as possible, but also repairable. And repairable means can you use any available piece that you'd stumble into off on the streets, or do you need to buy like an official part for it? And we do both. It's like if you need to repair your part or your bike or our bike, you can almost use anything off the street to repair it. If you want to use our parts, we've set up shops wherever we do major programs, so that people have easy access to spare parts. And those, by the way, the shops are doing fantastic. I think we have maybe 100 set up in 5, 6 different countries. And keeping the spare parts supply smooth is great, because people buy the parts and use them on their existing bikes, and they buy the parts if they need them for our bikes. They don't need to buy very many for our bikes. But keeping a sustainable system to us is like an essential part of the program. And because most of us come from a business background. It's like, if you can't make it sustainable and scalable, what's the point? Then it's a hobby. None of us are doing this for a hobby. We believe that we stumbled on something that's been overlooked, highly impactful, and needs to be broadcast and copied by other people. So we do that. But to your point about, the petrol stations and all of that, my observation and my experience with many of the countries that we work in is that their governments think that bicycles signify poverty and underdevelopment. So they begin to give tax breaks to um, light motorcycles and automobiles. It's like, you're kidding me. None of the people we work with, probably in their generation, are going to have a car. Probably not. I hope their welfare and their economic possibility enables them to get a car. But if they do, just as you say, that requires an entire different strata of infrastructure. And as oil today, I think, hit 100 US bucks, it's like, that ain't great. You can't rely on that. When the spare parts required to keep a car or a light motorcycle going, it's out of people's reach. So the countries that I see that give tax breaks to like light motorcycles, you see these broken pieces all over the road because people buy them, they borrow money for them, then after a couple of months they fall apart because, again, the manufacturer has been disconnected from the people they serve. So that is a fool's game, and it's played out every single day. And bikes don't solve all the problems. But bikes they're proving to be a very, very important part of the basic economic and social and even political structure of the countries that we're working in. God, if we could get more girls into school, finishing school, and then advocating for them, their families, their communities, their society, it's all of the data says that's off the charts important.
Yeah. You were in Uganda last week, weren't you? Because I tried to talk to you then. What were you doing there? Just like,
Uh,
that just happened to be in Uganda.
there it was. We were bringing all of our national directors together to review strategy and modify where needed, and to share ideas on what's working, what's not working. And it was so much fun to be there because I would be listening to like the national director of Zambia speaking with the national director of Uganda, and they were trying to solve a problem. And we've been in Zambia for maybe 10 years, maybe 15. So that national director had tons of experience and information. And the Uganda guy was like, well, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think about that? And the Zambia director was going, I like that idea. Here's what we experimented with, and it failed horribly. Don't try that. And here's what we found is really effective. So to see that cross pollination and sharing of ideas that makes my heart beat because that's how we built SRAM Corporation. That's how we built the other company, based on sharing ideas and constant improvement. And like we're like a thirsty learning machine, and then being able to share it, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way out of this mess, right? Collaboration, creativity, innovation, all of those things are going to get humans out of the mess that humans got themselves into, and just constant communication is my own philosophy. So FK, now, would you say, you're a businessman. Are you a philanthropist?
Um, Here's my
Because you're not
feeling
just
on that.
bunging money at it, clearly.
Yeah, my Uh, my feeling is that philanthropy doesn't cure much, um, but it does help pave the way with new ideas. But those new ideas need to be based in sustainable, scalable development. So, um, yeah, I'm a philanthropist. There are so many areas that, if you can't feed someone and they die, then that doesn't feel great. That's not acceptable. But if you can figure out how to feed someone, then teach them how to feed themselves and their family and their community. Now that's good. Sometimes philanthropy needs to experiment with ideas. So I look at philanthropy as like product development. It's like philanthropy should be used to probe ideas that are too risky for a business to go into. But once it goes into it and illuminates the way that a business can take over, now that's magic. That's where the magic occurs. So I'm a philanthropist. I believe that's a really important part of our responsibility as a society. Um, but in the end, the greatest gift that we could ever give to a country or a community is a sustainable business, an economic engine that can grow at an appropriate pace and last more than the length of your philanthropy. And philanthropy is fickle. You know, one day I feel philanthropic, and the next day I feel wildly selfish.
I love that. So honest. That is the essence of being human, actually. One day we're all about it, right? What can we do? What can we do about this terrible mess that the planet's in? And another day it's like, I can't, I just want to watch Netflix. We waver, don't we? We're not 100% on all the time. It's just, we do have some moments where we do well.
but
The
but
role of
the
philanthropy, though, is increasingly important, isn't it, in terms of conservation, sustainability, what are we doing to our planet? In all of those areas, the role of philanthropy has become increasingly important. And it's all very well to go, oh, well, we shouldn't even be in a place where there's philanthropy. We should all be equal. Well, we're not. And this is the state of the planet right now. And philanthropy has achieved extraordinary things. I mean, I'm thinking of the Patagonia brand, for example, and the philanthropic work that's come out of that. As a whole, do you think it works as a kind of system that we've fallen into as a global society?
my feeling is that a measurement of that would come from if the philanthropy stopped, if the money stopped, would the philanthropic organization die? And if it would die, then we've not done the job, or we've not completed the job we set out to do. If the job is to keep philanthropy going on the same task day after day, year after year, decades, generations, then we've not solved anything. The objectives should be to create a sustainable environment when you're trying to solve your mission. My feeling. And if you don't, then we have these gargantuan dinosaur philanthropic organizations that keep trying, or not. I don't even know. So I'm not in one, so I don't know. So I'm not going to speak for them. But what I witness is that these huge organizations keep doing what they're doing because that's what they do, and they're so structured to keep doing what they're doing that I don't think it'll change. To me, that's not dynamic philanthropy. And I believe what we need is dynamic philanthropy based on business ethics, business models that strive to create a sustainable and scalable environment. And if we don't, then we'll just be at it, and then you get donor fatigue, and then you spend more of your time worrying about the end of the year gala event, and will people come? Will we meet our philanthropic requirements? As opposed to, we've got an operating organization that's probing risky areas with philanthropy. And when we learn, we develop sustainable infrastructure for a business. I think they call it, oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember the name, uh, social enterprise. Uh, and that is, that's the start. Create a social enterprise that can scale on its own, not based on philanthropy, and then teach other people to copy them. And that's the big deal. For example, I believe at this point, after 20 years or 15 years, however old World Bicycle Relief is, we should be doing 1,000,000 bikes a year. And we have the capability of doing 1,000,000 bikes a year. We'll do 100,000 bikes a year. But 1,000,000 bikes a year won't even make a dent in the transportation issue that we're trying to solve. But if we can get the largest organizations in the world to copy us, and that would be bike manufacturers and aid organizations and NGOs and communities to copy us, and we create 20, 30, 40 million bikes a year, then we will have done our job. So to me right now, we've only just begun to teach people to copy. And we've illuminated this overlooked area. It's really, really important.
And social enterprise, you're right, is one of our keys. It's one of our tools that we have to be using for a sustainable planet going forward. It's fascinating. And I love this podcast because the more people we speak to, the more I think only you could have done this thing. Really. All of the ingredients came together for you to end up doing this thing. And so often that's the case on our podcast. And it could be a big thing or it could be a little thing, the different things that people do to make a difference, and the different paths that they end up following are sometimes windy and twisted and convoluted to get to where they got. But usually those winds and twists and turns are the reason that only them have ended up doing exactly what it is they're doing. And I love that about this podcast. And that's what I find so inspirational. Now I want to ask you a completely nerdy question about bikes, which is away from the global picture slightly, because, bikes environmentally friendly, the end. Only is it because now the e-bike has just appeared from nowhere in every country I go to. There's an e-bike, at least one. But yeah, people are crazy about them. I had a quick go on one last week in the Italian Alps, because obviously it's important that you test them only in the Italian Alps. Happened to be very lucky. I was working, I hasten to add, but they're really good. It's like going uphill has never been so easy. So I can completely see why people have fallen in love with them. But are we then corrupting the bike with the e-bike, do you think? You are a bike purist. I mean, you properly go up mountains using your legs.
So I got both of my hips replaced a year ago, both of them exactly the same time.
Is that because of biking up mountains and down mountains?
I don't know. Life's an impact sport. So, so anyway, I do use a regular bike, daily. I love regular bikes, but I've never seen anyone, including myself, step off of an e-bike without a smile on their face. And maybe it's generational. Maybe it'll, in the next 10 years, people will stop even considering how amazing e-bikes are, but they're kind of amazing. And to us who are straddling the old days of no electric bikes, And the new time right now of this incredible revolution, it's just fantastic. And I think, you know, e-bikes haven't even just begun.
Environmentally, are they a problem though, e-bikes? Because now we're talking about less green. We're talking about obviously using energy, but then batteries and all of that stuff.
Right. So my observation, if we separate, this conversation into two different markets, I would say e-bikes in the US and Europe are an essential part of the transportation solution. You look at the cities, they're congested. There's no parking. There's, people spend hours in traffic. Um, there's health issues. There's so many issues, and I think e-bikes are outstanding solutions for so many of those things, which provokes governments to build infrastructure to support bike lanes and all of that. So that's fantastic, and I think that's occurring. And the fact it's not occurring fast enough. My brother always says, who I've worked with for all my life, always says, "Okay, you're so impatient." It's like, well, this is so obvious. I can't believe we're not doing this yesterday. And he just shakes his head, and then I bring in more engineers, and then he shakes his head more. But
Sounds like a great relationship you two have.
but he he too is so behind the importance of basic infrastructure and transportation. It's bicycles are so overlooked in the world. For many years, they were looked at as, well, that's what poor people do, as opposed to, no, that's what smart people do. And I think that's beginning to tip, which is fantastic. And for in U.S. and Europe and many other of the of super developed countries, bikes are being used effectively. At the very bottom of the market, where we do a lot of our work with World Bicycle Relief, bikes are still regarded as the poor people's tool. So if you want to look like a poor person and be a poor person, you ride a bicycle, as opposed to, you're smart. Uh, but e-bikes all over the world, I think, are making such a huge impact and reducing so much of the dependence on fossil fuels and reducing traffic. Traffic consumes more fossil fuels. Traffic, reduces your health. I mean, oh my God, you want to go a mile in Nairobi, Kenya? Just plan on bringing your lunch, cups of coffee, watch a video, and you'll get through an hour in your car in Nairobi in 1 hour. But if you were on an e-bike, you do that in, 5 minutes. But there's no infrastructure there. But if infrastructure was created and planned from the beginning, and so many of the countries we work in have the opportunity to plan from the beginning, then amazing things can happen. But still, many governments and the UN, the World Bank, all of these, USAID, DFID, all that, still don't fully understand the impact of a bicycle on in rural or urban areas. And when that comes across, then that's going to be really, really important. And I believe that if you're tasked with designing or evolving a city from scratch, you would build bicycle infrastructure because it's so important. Even in four-season cities, Chicago is four-season. It's got a super nasty winter. It's got a super wet spring. Summers are gorgeous. Fall, plan to be wet again, and then jump into winter, and you just have to dress for it. But if you're on a bike, you will be happier, healthier, cut your travel time, be better for the planet, arrive at work and, hug your colleagues as opposed to yell at them because you've just had a great experience. What's better than being outside and enjoying the joy of your freedom? And that's, I think, what e-bikes are going to do for us in such a great way.
So they're opening up the world of bicycles in a way
Yes.
that makes it more attainable for so many people. And also, if your commute is just that bit longer, then you would be comfortable cycling every day. It opens up the distance as well as the fits. I love the fat bikes as well because having lived in a snowy town and watching people commute on fat bikes, with also because let's face it, the gear is always quite fun. Those amazing gloves that attach to the handlebars that people put their hand. Oh, they're lovely. Yeah, they're lovely. So, okay, that's a really interesting take on e-bikes because I've had that in the back of my head. Is it a really good thing though, or should we not have invented the e-bike? But you think definitely that opens the way to reduced reliance on fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I look at I look at where I will live here in Jackson, which you know quite well, and Wyoming, and I see the kids using e-bikes to go to school. And if you look outside in the the bike parking lot, it is littered with electric bikes. Whereas before electric bikes, there would be some bikes, but the fact around electric bikes is crazily beautiful. These kids are riding themselves to school. They've taken on the independence, the joy of riding a bike, and most of them are these cargo bikes, the long bikes. So they're riding another person to school with them. So they don't rely on their parents. They don't rely on themselves driving a car, and that that is magical. That's where it all occurs. For me, I'm trying to move 20 pounds from down here to up here. So I'll keep trying to use my regular bike, but riding an e-bike is pure joy. It's joy. It's not just an institution. It's joy.
As has been talking to you. So thank you very much for sharing your time and your wisdom and everything bike. And as I go back to the beginning, what I love about your story and your work is, we think bikes are great environmentally friendly tools, but there is so much more and so much more impact that they can have. And I love that about the work that you've done and the adventure that you've been on. So long may it last and keep in touch with what you're doing. Have you got an eye on the future? Is there another place where you think that the work can have the biggest impact?
At SRAM, the company that works on the high end stuff, uh, we make some of the components for some of the highest performing bikes in the world. But my sense is the most powerful bike we've ever made is one in the hands of a schoolgirl going to school in rural Africa, or one in the hands of a mother fighting to build her business or feed her family. And I think that area has so much opportunity to grow and make an impact and change the absolute infrastructure and culture of the areas that they exist in. I'm so motivated to keep throwing everything I've learned and all of my energy into that. And I'm just thankful to have that as my North Star.
And I'm sure lots of people are thankful to have you and the support that you guys have offered. So, and thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Philippa. Really nice to catch up.